David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And I'm back today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
Oh, apart from the fact I'm missing another tooth now,
Oh, that's no fun.
that was my joy yesterday, going to the orthodontist or the oral surgery and having teeth pulled. So yeah.
Oh, that just sounds miserable.
Oh well, it
Um,
wasn't too bad actually. So
yeah, um, yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
no,
Anyways,
forget it.
for
Move on.
folks, we appreciate everybody coming back. I was traveling last week. We didn't have the show 2 days, so we'll try to make up for it. We're having lots of fun facts for you today. So my favorite article today has got to be the article about Rivian and
Yep.
Volkswagen.
Yep.
So that one I find very pleasing because this is one of those things where, you know, you and I talk about this all the time, that some of these companies in the US, so Tesla's fine, right? Tesla was first to market. They've proved what can be proven, and they're doing all right. Okay. Um, the other EV companies, not so much, right? But um, Rivian and Lucid, in their own ways, are trying to make their way through the world, and we're going to see where that ends up, kind of thing. But what I really like, Volkswagen has dumped or committed at least $5 billion into Rivian, and some of that's for software development, some for other things. But now, um, according to executives from, I'm not sure if it's from Volkswagen or Rivian or both, the Rivian R2 will underpin all future Volkswagen EVs. So they apparently really like the architecture and other things, and so they're going to be designed around um, the R2.
Yeah, we
So,
should point out that they're referring to the software stack that
mhm,
is that they're incorporating into it. And I think the comments are coming from the gentleman who is the co-founder or co-CEO of this joint Volkswagen Rivian software development entity. And that's what he's saying, that the stack that's going to be running Rivian and the new Volkswagen EVs are coming from that same entity.
yeah. So Rivian's chief software officer, his name was Wasim bin Saeed. He's also the co-head of the Rivian Volkswagen joint venture. Says he aims to right the ship for Volkswagen to help get Rivian software products to as many users as possible. One of the things, and we talked about this before, Jim Farley had spoken about the fact that at Ford, they have like 100+ different software developing companies that write code for various Ford vehicles.
Mm.
And the idea of having a single car operating system, kind of how Tesla and
Yeah.
Rivian and Lucid have come about it, is sort of foreign to the big auto manufacturer. Ford had to start bringing in their own software development in-house for them to make the transition to EVs. And so Volkswagen is instead outsourcing this aspect
To
to
Rivian.
Rivian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it makes sense. And Volkswagen is the world's largest car manufacturer, or maybe they're number two now. Is Toyota number one?
Yeah.
It goes back and forth, I
It
think.
goes back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, so Volkswagen software initiatives had hit snags. Most significantly, with it's got a program called Car IAD Software Unit, which led to big delays for its EVs in the Porsche and Audi portfolio. As for Rivian, it still isn't making money, though it did reach some profitability milestones last quarter. The upstart electric vehicle maker needs the billions provided by Volkswagen to update its factory and get R2 into production. Um, it's interesting. They showed a picture of the um, R2 that's in a black and white motif, and it
Hmm.
looks really good. Here it
Yeah.
is.
And of
Um,
course, remember, Volkswagen is also the entity behind the Scout. So there's going to
yes,
be, obviously, I would assume there's going to be some commonality there because, I mean, between the R2 and the Scout, they look an awful lot alike.
right. No, there's definitely big similarities. but it's just a great looking vehicle. The thing is too, your Hyundais are starting to look like that as well. I
Hmm.
mean, similar wheels. I mean, now, we're talking about how Volkswagens are kind of looking like the Rivian. Well, the Hyundais look kind of like that because they had hired a designer from Audi, you know,
Yeah.
and Audi's a Volkswagen brand.
Right.
It's interesting to see how some of the things come around. Like I said before, if I were told to go draw a picture of a truck I want to design, because I still have first grade art skills, it would look like a Cybertruck probably.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's not a whole lot of creativity there in the design. I'm amazed that
Well, that's
you
why they
can.
make the big bucks. They
Right.
hire them, and they compete and hire them away from various companies and things like that. So there's a lot of that going on in the industry.
Yeah, I'm impressed that they can keep coming up with cool designs for cars. It's like, haven't all the designs been done? It's kind of like music. I keep thinking, it's like, how many different ways can you keep combining the notes, right?
No.
And people keep coming up with more.
Speaking of which, I was listening to a guy. Are you familiar with the Roman dodecahedron?
I've heard of it.
This is a bronze device that they found all over the Roman Empire that is a dodecahedron, multi-sided, piece of whatever it is. And it's got little knobs on it and things like this. And there's this guy over in England who's came up with a possible reason for them, that it is the Roman Empire equivalent of the Enigma machine. Okay. And this isn't too far off, actually, when you think about it. So anyway, and he started measuring that. There it is. And so he started coming up with all of the possible combinations that you could have by using this device. And and the number of letter combinations using this device is in the centillions. It's, it's actually more than the seconds of the universe's life. And so when you talk about music, you can make very similar comments. Now, obviously, there are patterns that have to be replicated to be able to make sense to the human mind. But music, you could have all kinds of. I don't know if anybody's done the math in it, but it's probably also in the bazillions of combinations of notes. So anyway, little aside.
Yeah. The one of the theories is that it was designed to determine the optimal sowing date for winter grain, and that it could be used to measure the angle of sunlight passing through the
Yeah,
dodecahedron.
I like the code machine answer.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's various theories that they're children's toys, gambling games, or fortune telling devices.
Yeah.
And other choices were perhaps they were thrown in their faces, read like that of dice. I mean, uh, yeah, found all over the world. Nobody knows what they were for.
Well, in the Roman Empire, they're found all over the Roman Empire.
Yeah. It's still, it's kind of, maybe it was a
Yeah.
device they just threw out there to, like Legos, so people wouldn't break into your house. You'd hear them scream. It's like, ah,
Yeah.
start cussing after they stepped on one.
After you
Yeah.
step on one. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Anyways,
back to the subject of EVs.
yes. Well, that was sort of an AI topic, I think. I mean,
Right. Right.
I feel fine, when we cover AI issues, but I just
Oh,
that was my favorite topic, was the one about the R2, because I just like
speaking
seeing that happen.
speaking of, I have an article that I'm working on, and I've published in sort of a format on EV World that takes on the issue of EV battery weight. Are electric cars actually heavier than gasoline or diesel powered cars? And the answer is no freaking way. EVs, even when you take the battery of the weight of the battery into consideration, weigh significantly less than a gasoline car. It's on the, if you go to the website and you look over on the RS feed or the RS stream, you'll see the link. It's the very top link. I just got done posting it online before we came on the show here. It's an eye opener.
The static weight variance between the vehicles, static versus dynamic weight paradigm.
Thousands of pounds different between a diesel car and a gasoline car when you include the weight of the gasoline. And the AI actually, I said, all right, now take into consideration that a car has so much fuel on board, and as it's getting driven, that weight's going down. So take all that into consideration and come up with the numbers for me. It's an eye opener. It's an eye opener.
It is such a poor thing. It's like, when they start saying that it's the particulates from the tires and the particulates from the brake pads that EV drivers don't even use that are causing all this pollution. Like, well, what are they doing with the brakes?
Yep.
It's like, it just really makes you wonder where these people come up with this crazy thing with research.
Here's another one to think of. Batteries, they always say, well, batteries, it takes so much materials to make batteries, right? And compared to that empty piece of metal that sits under the back of the car, right?
Yeah.
That's not how you figure it. You have to also take into consideration the stuff that goes in it. And when you consider the tonnage of the amount of petroleum that we pull out of the ground and use to power our internal combustion whatevers, that weight of the tonnage of oil is dramatically in the, I don't exactly remember the numbers precisely, but it is significantly more than the amount of metals that it takes to build an electric car battery. But we never talk about that. We always talk about that weight of that car. Take everything into consideration here, folks, when you
take that transmission and that engine out. And
that's only a fraction of it. That's only a fraction of it. When you consider the oil that we pump out in the tens of millions of tons compared to the small number of the weight of a battery, no comparison.
No, I get so many disingenuous arguments from people that have heard something or read something, and I'm like, did you see that on Facebook? Or I just don't know where some of these people come up with some of these numbers. But like we keep referring to that UK study, and it's like, what kind of study is that?
Yeah,
were these real researchers? I mean, it made no sense whatsoever to make the claims that they claimed. But it's like our senator here in North Dakota, in Nebraska. I forget what state I live in currently.
Right.
That claimed that EVs weighed up to 3 times as much as other cars. And it's like, what are you talking about?
No way. Well, she's a rancher from Nebraska. She may know the weight of cattle, but she doesn't know beans about the weight of an electric car.
Oh, she probably has an F-350 or Chevy or Dodge equivalent too, for hauling her horses around, right?
Yep.
And doesn't realize that it could be they're not yet making Super Duty EV trucks. Okay, it's just a matter of time.
Well,
but I mean, in the ranching space and all that, I mean, that's one of the real use cases, because that's where like electric tractors are coming in and stuff like that, because it's a closed site, right? And so there's a lot of options for doing that. But it's just sad when you've got people wanting to make laws about things they don't understand. So
and probably being influenced by some lobbyist from the oil and gas industry who walked into her office and handed her a sheet of paper and said, look, we got to pass a law because these things are so heavy and they're so polluting. Okay, here, Owen, a gallon of gasoline is 6.3 pounds. But when you burn that gasoline in a combustion engine, it combines with the oxygen in the air and produces over 20 pounds additional. weight. So not only do we have to take into consideration the weight of the gasoline in the tank, we also have to consider the weight that is created by that engine in the form of CO2, and that is thousands of pounds of CO2 annually per car. So let's be realistic here when we discuss these things.
Yeah. So, uh, some of this stuff, it just gets a little out of hand sometimes, but I get so tired of seeing politicians on both sides. From the Democrats, it's usually something when they make some stupid comment about guns, and you can tell they don't know anything about firearms, and they're trying to make claims, and I'm just like, doesn't so couldn't you just ask your security guard? Your security guard probably knows about guns, or something. But yeah, in this particular case, it happens to be people being dumb about EVs. They just have no idea um, what's going on. Like we said, if she's a rancher, she's got a great use case actually for using EVs. Um, which brings me, I'm going to segue into
Okay.
my story about Ford. So Ford, as a company, has really good news about U.S. sales. They're up. They just reported they're up 16% year over year in May, and they've been running this employee pricing program to offset the auto tariffs and that helped boost, as well as a double-digit increase in the sales of gas and hybrid vehicles. So their gas sales were up 17.2%. Hybrids were up 29%,
That's better.
but they saw a 25% decrease in the Ford F-150 Lightning.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure. I've been trying to theorize what may have caused that in the F-150. And kind of my theory. So, in my mind, I wouldn't buy a truck unless I had a real need for it. Okay. I would only own a truck if I really was going to do a lot of hauling. Because if you own a truck just casually, everybody wants your help every time they want to move
Moving.
or whatever. Okay. So there's definitely downsides to being the one person in the family that owns a truck. Okay. Like one of my kids is a general contractor and he has a full size pickup,
Makes
and
sense.
who do we call when we need something moved? Yeah. But yeah, but I'm just saying, that's a bit of a challenge to deal with. But I think that Ford's being outdone by Chevy. Okay. And Chevy with they should just call it the big ass battery, but with their big battery packs, with the 200 plus kilowatt hour battery packs, they're capable of towing a couple hundred miles. Okay. And so if you're really buying a truck to do real truck things and not just drive it back and forth to an office job, the Chevy's more capable. Not saying you can't tow something with a Ford. It's just that your range is limited to probably. I understand it breaks down to almost only about 80 miles when you're towing at its max capacity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So whereas the Chevy still gets like 200 miles, but you got to fill up that really big battery. Um, maybe the
Yeah.
wife. Yeah. Yeah, but it really depends where. If it are, I was suspecting Joel may be in Texas. I mean, it just seems like the thing to do. You own a truck in some states, Oklahoma as well. Nebraska has a lot of that. But I'm just saying, if you're just driving back and forth to work, the Lightning makes a lot of sense. But if you are actually really working with your truck and you're going to buy an EV, the Chevy makes more sense, or the GM, with their bigger battery.
Are we getting any sponsorship here from General Motors, Dave? We ought to be talking.
No, well, I'll drop Mary Barra a line. Yeah, I had an automotive manufacturer that we've talked about on the show before that's kind of new. I had their CEO reach out this morning, and I invited him onto the show, and he said he would. So,
Right.
yeah,
Great.
it's the CEO of Longbow over in the UK.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, and we've talked about their sports cars on the show previously. So,
That'll be
you
fun.
know, yeah, so that'll be nice. Um, I had somebody yesterday that reached out to me to discuss nuclear that I'd like to have on the show that's in autonomous vehicle infrastructure. And
Okay.
uh, I'm just going to say that he's one of those programs that Jigger approved at the end, right before the Biden left
Right.
office,
Right.
and the new guys come in and nixed his funding.
Yeah.
Okay, but he said he's going to get it from a sovereign wealth fund, anyways.
Okay.
So it's
Good for
not
him.
out the door. Yeah, but he said when he was pitching it as EVs, it didn't go real well. When he started pitching it as autonomous vehicles, everybody was really interested in
Oh, interesting.
investing. Yeah,
Yeah.
so because it's talking about the AI aspect. Everybody's interested in the AI
Sure.
aspect,
Yep.
but everybody
Yep.
also kind of knows that your autonomous vehicles are all electric, and
Well, you
you
would
know, I mean,
think, yeah.
they could be gas, but I think it's going to be a little more challenging. I mean, I'm sure it's not that challenging to set up something that'll pump gas autonomously, but I watch. Have you ever watched these videos of like um, an aerial view of a Waymo parking lot?
I have
And
seen some, yes, where they're
yeah,
moving. Well, the one that I saw recently was the Berlin Gigafactory,
I
where
saw
those
that.
cars are coming out of the Gigafactory and they're parking themselves
Yeah, yeah, I
in the
watched.
finished lot. Yeah.
Yeah, as the cars are manufactured, the cars just
Yeah.
drive autonomously. They're not allowed on the road in Germany,
No,
but like that, but they autonomously go and park themselves in
park
the waiting
themselves,
lots. Yeah,
which is brilliant act. I think that, of course, that now you don't have the employee who spends his time shuttling back and forth between the factory and the finish lot. So
yeah, I get that, but it's still it's a
it's
good
cool.
use case for
It's
the
cool.
product, right?
Yes, it
And
is.
I think that's good press, but I'm really kind of shocked by what was a 25% drop in sales of all electric vehicles, but most notably the F-150. Um, I
Yeah,
mean,
just
Ford essentially has three electric vehicles. They've got the was it Proline? Is that the name of their van?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
um,
they've
it's Pro
got
something.
the F-150 and the Mach-E.
Yeah, and
Here
so
in the United States, now over in Europe, they've introduced the Capri as an EV.
yeah, yep, and of course they have the Ford Explorer over there,
Right.
and they've got other vehicles. Oh, I've heard about that getting like a patent, you know,
Yeah.
but I haven't heard about it actually, you know, doing anything. I don't know. I see some of that stuff happening. I know that in the tote the note business, they all have a remote kill switch, and if you don't make your payments, they can kill your
Well,
car.
yeah, they Renault introduced when they first introduced their electric cars, this is 20 years ago. You
Hmm.
didn't have to buy the battery. You leased the battery. So that helped them reduce the cost of the car, right? So, but you
Hmm.
had to pay a monthly subscription for the battery.
Hmm.
If you didn't renew the subscription, if you defaulted on a payment or whatever, they would turn off the battery.
Yeah. Well, when VinFast first came to the United States, they were trying that model in California where you lease the battery.
Yeah.
And to a
Just
certain degree,
hasn't
well,
taken off for some reason. Just people
well,
want to be able to make sure that they own what they own.
right. Well, I kind of get though the idea of leasing the battery because that's everybody's fears that the battery lasts like the 12-volt
Exactly.
battery and only lasts for 50,000 miles. So
Right.
if you're constantly renting a battery, it's going to get replaced, right? So
Yep.
it's basically like having an unlimited battery warranty. So, I mean, you're paying for it, but you know what I'm saying. It's just,
It's got a plus to it, certainly. Yeah.
yeah.
To reduce buyer anxiety. Yeah. Makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. But anyways, that was interesting news from Ford. It was both positive. It was
Yeah.
positive for Ford, negative for the EV
And then
space.
and then we can talk about sales in Europe for Tesla.
Oh yeah.
Now Norway is, boy, that's in there and doing well for Tesla. But France, Switzerland, Sweden, they're just crashing like crazy, the sales there.
Hmm. Well, one of the things is in the couple of years that you and I have been doing this show, um, it's gone from just being a Tesla only market to all of a sudden
Oh, there's lots
there's a
more. Yeah,
lot of cars out there. There's, what is it? Europe probably has 100 different models of EVs now. You
well,
know,
when you particularly when you include the influx of Chinese vehicles,
right.
I think the most popular car, and I forget which country it is now in Europe, is the BYD. I think the Seal
Hmm.
or something like that is now outselling everybody else.
Yeah. So I mean, you got competition now. Tesla used to be the, you know, only kid on the block.
Right.
So
Well,
that's
there were electric cars being produced in Europe prior to the introduction of Tesla, but they
okay.
were very, very small numbers. In the case of, like, I think Renault, or was it Citroen? I think it was Citroen, was actually just taking and rebadging a Mitsubishi IMEV, which was,
Mhm.
the little tiny car, had like 50 miles of range on it. And that was just, they just took that car because they were part of an alliance, and they just simply put a Citroen badge on it and market it there. So there were not a lot. It really took Tesla getting into that market to begin to turn things around. And of course,
Jo
now everybody's catching up.
yeah. Joel, the answer is no. Um, I don't know. How fast do you think if you just left your car sitting in the garage, the range degrades? Just from just sitting and not
On
being used.
on mine, negligible.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still probably a mile
I,
or two a day.
no, I wouldn't even think that much.
No?
I'll,
Yeah.
Let me run out and check my Fiat, and I'll tell you, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not getting driven like our Bolt anymore. I love that Bolt. Oh, I
Yeah.
love
I'm
the Bolt.
I'm just saying that if you left it sit for 2 months, you might drop down to
You're going to see some
80%.
degradation. Sure, you'll see some
Yeah.
degradation. Yeah,
Yeah. But
and
I, I,
you know where the problem is. It's not necessarily the problem with degrading the traction battery, because that's an awful lot of energy, right? It's the fact that the 12 volt isn't being recharged, because every time you power up the traction battery, part of that energy is going into the 12 volt. And the 12 volt is the heartbeat of the car, right? If your 12 volt dies, your EV won't run, even if it's got a huge 60, 70, 80, 200 kilowatt pack. It won't run without that little tiny 12 volt. So
yeah.
I think that's where the problem
Well, and
happens.
and an Oasis says that it's less than 3% monthly.
Yeah,
Now,
doesn't
if
surprise
you
me.
were running the Tesla Sentry mode, it uses 10% of your battery per day. So
Yeah,
that's a different story.
it's recording all
Recorded.
everything that's going on around you, and you can catch the people that are keying your car. And
Yeah. So you probably don't run that when it's in your garage, but you
nah,
might want to run it when it's outside these days.
yeah.
Um, all right, let's move on. I've got a little nuclear news about Meta, or it used to be called Facebook. Now you got to call it Meta. Anyways, and they did that because they're really big on the metaverse, and
Yeah. Whatever
I'm still,
happened to that?
I don't know. Facebook has one apparently.
Yeah.
Um, I just never really understood. People were so excited. You can buy real estate in the metaverse. Oh, at an event I was at this past week, somebody was selling virtual land rights on the moon, not actual land rights on the moon, virtual land rights on the moon. And I'm just like, he was talking about what a big thing this was going to be. And it's like, and he was showing in these VR glasses how you could look, and look at the
There's
moon.
there's the problem. Who wants to spend their time with this thing on their face for hours, right? In fact, there's what was I was reading? Some guy actually inadvertently he spent so much time on in VR with things that he somehow inadvertently killed him. Well, I shouldn't say that. Apparently, we're not supposed to say that. Who inadvertently did away with himself
Hmm.
while using the VR glass. I don't know whether he stumbled or fell over something or whatever, but that's I mean, yeah, it's fun, for a gaming environment for an hour or so. But those things are heavy, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm like, well, so much we're discussing, like, how often do you want to look at your virtual moon real estate?
Moon
You know,
base, yeah,
yeah. I'm like, oh, what? Some craters on the moon look interesting. I mean, I really, I don't know. I see people raising money for all kinds of amazing, great ideas and stuff like this. This one was just like, why are you here? I
why?
mean,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I see guys who have cures for all kinds of diseases that are trying to bring them to market. Um, and these are guys with like multiple PhDs sometimes.
right.
And
It's not like they don't know what they're talking about.
yeah, and just all kinds of science to back stuff up. Um, and some of these are like, man, some of these things I see, they're fantastic for like the medical space, different things like that. And it's funny though, so many of these things, you know, they're great business ideas and they just don't work out. It seems exciting and there may be a real need and a real problem it solves, but if you can't get it in the right hands of the people, then the people just don't feel it's that big of a deal, or they don't feel compelled. You don't have the right salespeople or the right pitch to get people to understand
Yeah,
its value.
yeah.
It's really a challenge
It's
sometimes. It's like I was telling you about the guy with the autonomous infrastructure. Um, he had somebody tell him he was pitching it wrong, and he was telling me, and it was funny because he'd asked me if I'd looked any information on his company, and I'd actually forgotten that I'd actually looked at his website, because from his website I really it didn't tell me
wasn't
much,
yeah,
didn't tell me enough. And when I talked to him and he explained it, it's like, oh, I get that. And I was sitting here thinking how I would frame it if I were talking to somebody, and so it's a different space. But anyways, back to the issue of Meta, and this is Meta's AI. Meta has reached a 20-year deal to buy power from an Illinois nuclear plant from Constellation Energy, to meet the energy demands of its AI offerings. It's a plant called Clinton, and they're going to start receiving power in mid 27, so 2 years from now. Um, and Constellation Energy has secured federal approval to build a second reactor at the site. Constellation plans to bring, oh, they're the same people that are bringing 3 Mile Island back in Pennsylvania and sell the output to Microsoft. Oh, I didn't realize LinkedIn was owned by Microsoft. I guess they must have bought them at some point.
yeah,
But
probably, yeah.
um, it's interesting kind of to see that space. There's been three recent executive actions in the nuclear space that are basically designed to help make it so that some of these projects can get approval. And I know NewScale had something approved like 2 days ago or 3 days ago.
Okay.
So for a different size reactor, and it's funny, Canada has different rules for SMR. So they have grid scale rules, which are the big ones, and
All right.
and then they have a different regulations for the smaller ones so that they can get fast tracked. And so, but what's happening is people are trying to make these clusters of up to 20 SMR reactors, but there's an advantage to that. If you can manufacture the reactor somewhere in the US and then ship it to the site, as opposed to assembling the whole thing on site, it
Right.
makes a lot more sense. I've been trying to explain it to people. It's the trailer park of the nuclear industry. They just truck it in, behind a truck,
Yeah. Yeah.
and erect it like a bunch of trailer parks. But it is,
And
it's
hopefully, so they're not prone to being damaged by tornadoes.
there you go. There you
Yeah.
go. It won't look like that. They're going to be in hardened facilities that
Right.
inside, but It's just,
And some
yeah.
and some of them that they're talking about burying them a mile underground too.
Yeah, well, the company I'm working with, they're 15 meters below, so 50 feet,
Yeah,
just enough so they're where the Earth is 52 degrees.
right.
So let me see. Um, so I was talking to somebody. An acre of data processing uses about a megawatt. Somebody was telling, but I would have assumed that you would use more than that. But yeah, so here's one of the things that people keep saying that the grid can't handle EVs. Well, the truth is, EVs are just scratching the surface of what AI is going to need for
Well,
power.
typically EVs generally are being charged overnight. I think probably if you look at a fraction, it's probably the
Mhm.
larger fraction of the ones are owned by people who have garages and things like that, and they park them overnight. Whereas
When your air conditioner is not working real hard.
when your air conditioner's not working real hard, yeah. So you got that happening. Although there's, I think reports out of Stanford or whatever that said, well, we should be doing it during the day, which in California's case makes sense because most of their grid is operating off of solar
Solar.
and wind during the day. So
Mhm.
that makes sense. Whether that makes sense here in Nebraska or Illinois or Alabama, whatever, that depends on the local area there. Um, but people are using AI like I did today. I've used it extensively already today just to ask this question about the weight of an electric car versus the weight of a gasoline car, right? And
Mhm.
so I used it to generate that information. And then I told it, write the article for me. You gave me all this great information and graphs and charts. Let's turn this into an article for people to read. And so I can use that thing 24/7 if I'm awake, right? And there are
Mhm.
parts of the world where if we're asleep, they're awake and they're using AI. So it's I think a little bit different.
Yeah. So in the nuclear space, all of the AI data center companies, the really big ones like Meta, Google, and Amazon and Microsoft are being referred to as hyperscalers. So that's the term that
Yeah.
they're saying this is what's causing the big resurgence in an interest in nuclear is the hyperscalers. If the hyperscalers decided they weren't going to do nuclear, all this interest in nuclear would go away again for a few years. I'm not saying that people wouldn't
Yeah.
still be talking about it, but it's the fact that you've got these gigantic companies that have massive power needs and they see it coming. They're already using it, but they see more needs coming, and that's the only way they're going to be able to probably hit some of that unless they start burning coal again.
God
Let's
forbid.
see. Yeah, I know. I know. All right, we have this article. Did megawatt DC fast charging for EVs just inch closer to reality? Well,
Yeah,
it's definitely coming. And so the Society of Automotive Engineers just dropped its J3400/2 standard, helping pave the way for 1,000 kilowatt charging. Now, there are already cars for sale in China that'll support this. And we talked about this that
yeah,
I think it was Cattle was doing some 1.25
yeah.
megawatt
And
chargers.
BYD has one now.
Yeah. The question is always, how do you get power to that site? I mean,
Yeah,
that's a lot. Even if you had big battery backups trying to stabilize the grid in that area to store it so it's immediately available, that's a lot of damn batteries to be
yeah.
able to have because you're going to need to probably
And
20 megawatts
yeah, well, and let's make sure we clarify that the car doesn't have 1,000 kilowatt, battery.
battery. It just
No,
can take it that fast.
it's like going from a garden hose
Yeah,
to a fire hose
right.
in the ability to. So there's a lot of amps being pushed down that cable as opposed to much smaller, fewer amps being pushed down. Of course, that's all has to do with the function of the capacity of the battery and how the internal chemistry handles that and what do they deal with the heat, because that's going to be generating a lot of heat. So it's an interesting development. Whether that's, I mean, who is that really applicable for?
Hmm.
I don't know if it's so much applicable for the average car owner as it is maybe for you for trucks, maybe
Hmm.
for airport utility vehicles, things of that nature. The example being the new bus rapid transit system that just launched in Cairo. They've
Hmm.
got 100 electric buses now part of their BRT system. So for that, you might want that ability. Whether I want 1,000 for my little Volt out there or my Fiat, probably not. But
Yeah.
trucks certainly.
Yeah. Well, that was another one of my articles talk about, you know, the batteries on trucks. And, but anyways, yeah, this is 1,000 volt charging at 1,000 amps is going on with BYD's Super E platform. It charges at 10 times the battery's rated capacity, allows it to add 250 miles in 5 minutes. Now, that's on a car. That's not on a truck. I mean,
Right.
but um, let's see. Yeah, well, it could absolutely, if you had no power whatsoever, you didn't have solar, any of that, it could absolutely power your car for 3 days. You could power the whole house. You could run your air conditioning, everything. Yeah, because the car battery is just huge. So think about this. And I don't know where you live, Joel, or what you spend for electricity. We live in Nebraska, which is one of the cheapest states for electricity. It's like retails like 12 cents a kilowatt, but you're not really burning um, even running air conditioner in a big house here, you spend
Well,
about $10 a day. And I have solar, so I don't
yeah,
see that anymore. But in the summer, it'd be like $10 a day in
yeah,
electricity.
and let's point out that generally most of those outlets on like the Ford Lightnings and the Rivians and things,
Hmm.
those are all 110. Whereas you're talking about and probably what I don't know, maybe 30 amps.
Yeah,
Um,
but if you have a bidirectional charger that you can put it back, you can use 240 volt to put it back into the house.
yeah, but I don't think you're going to get 3 days out of it. Now, but
Hmm.
that being said, though, you're the one thing that you probably will want to run the most won't be the oven or won't be the dryer. What you'll want to be doing is running your refrigerator because you've
Hmm.
got all that, or your freezer because you've got all that money tied up in frozen goods and those things. And that's I've we've had power losses here, and I've had to throw food away. So that gets expensive. So I think things that you want, obviously, you're going to want power probably for your electronic devices. You're going to want lights, particularly in the evening. For a short period of time, you're probably going to want maybe just in an emergency use the microwave for your heat. I don't think you're going to be baking cookies on your oven when the
Yeah.
when the power's out. Those are the emergency kind of situations, and you certainly want to have enough power to run, the coffee maker in the morning. I mean, those are the experiences I've had. We're out of power. Where am I going to get my coffee from? Right? Um,
Yeah. We've
use my
had
barbecue
people.
grill.
Yeah, we've seen interesting articles where somebody's kid had a dialysis machine at home or,
Australia, yeah,
in Australia,
yeah,
and they had a massive storm or something came in and people were without power for days,
yeah,
and they simply powered the dialysis machine from their
yeah,
car,
yeah.
and
And
it was no problem. But they
that's
also
well,
had solar. So in Australia, people really, really, I think new homes have to have solar. I'm not 100% on that, but
no.
it's so prevalent there that they could just recharge the car
Yeah.
during the day as well.
What is Australia on the 220 or 240 50
I,
hertz system?
I'm not sure.
If
Probably.
anybody listening in, if you know what that is, I don't actually know because there, unfortunately, I've had experience with dialysis machines. Not personally, my son had a kidney failure and had to go on dialysis. So
Mhm.
that, of course, plugged in and ran off of the 110 current here in the house. If Australia is like the rest of Europe, it's probably they're running on 240, 50 cycle. So
I think I'm going to save the trucking article for tomorrow. We've gone long enough today, Bill.
okay.
So, folks, want to thank everybody for chiming in. Good show today, Bill. I'll be back tomorrow with Mike Herzog, and Bill and I will be back on Thursday.
All right. Be sure to read that article, by the way, on the weight of EVs and gasoline cars. It's an eye opener.
All right, folks. Have a great day.